Um, What we've been doing in the first part of the service, starting at 9:30 on Saturday mornings, Shabbat mornings, is we've been going through the liturgy of the regular Shabbat. We've gone through the preliminary service. We've gone through Shacharit, the Shema, and the Amidah. So you have a sense of the structure of the service. I did not get to what I'm calling choreography. The cantor is in the building. The cantor is in the building. Your wardrobe must be like big.
What?
You have a lot of different outfits.
I try.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. At any rate, I wanted to mention just before we get started on our new track that there is a certain choreography to some things. At Aleinu, for example, ve'anachnu korim. Korim means bend the knee. So that's when you bend your knee. Umishtachavim, and then you bow over. Umodim, and it means acknowledge or give thanks. Lifnei melech means before the king. Now, a lot of people want to know if Lifnei melech has anything to do with lift up your head, but it doesn't. But that's when you do it. So korim is where you bend your knees. Mishtachavim, modim, you're bowing forward, and you're up on Lifnei melech. That's a choreography. At the Amidah, it's like Baruch, bend your knee, Atah, bend over, Adonai, and you stand up. An easy way to remember that, if you know any Hebrew, is Baruch comes from the same root as Berech. Berech means knee. And there's some etymologists who think that there might be a connection between kneeling down at a pool, a brecha, to get water, is something that camels would do, leading to the water, which is a blessing. So I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll mention other little bits of choreography as we go, but now we're starting a different train of thought.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a reason there's no lights?
The what? Oh, yeah, look at that. You want to get Tony to do that? Okay, that's fine. So we're talking now in the build up to the high holidays on some holiday themes. And so for the next couple of minutes, we're going to be talking a little bit about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, what we call the high holidays. Jonathan Sachs points out that there is a verse in Isaiah that addresses the religious intensity of the holiday. Isaiah said, "God, seek God where he is to be found, and call on God when God is close." And the rabbis had a problem with this. What do you mean God is close? God's nearby all the time. You know, he's everywhere. He's all the time. He's always there to be found. And the verse seems to make no sense. Seek God when God is close, because God's always here. And their answer was that this was referring to a very specific time. These are the 10 days of repentance from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, meaning God is always close to us, but we're not always so close to him. So he may be ready to be found, but we're not always ready to go find him. The holidays kind of get set up because of their singular importance. And you wouldn't know that they're important from the Torah, but we'll get to that in a little bit. It's like a drama, like a courtroom drama. And the shofar is the call to begin the process. It wakes us out of our everyday consciousness into an awareness of being present of something vast and momentous. And in becoming a courtroom, we have a certain amount of analogy. God's the judge. The shofar announces that the court's in session. We're on trial giving an account for our lives. And the liturgy leads us to ask ourselves questions. Who am I? Why am I here? How am I going to live? How have I lived up till now? Have I used God's greatest gift, time? Who have I wronged, and how can I put it right? Where have I failed, and how shall I overcome my failures? What's broken in my life, and what needs mending? What chapter am I writing in my book of life? I think, who was it? Was it Socrates who said the unexamined life is not worth living, which led some wise guy to say, and the examined life is, but
I think so.
it might have been Socrates. I think it was after Aristotle, but anyway, it was one of the big Greek guys. But the only reason I bring up the unexamined life is not worth living is that if you've really gone through a Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you have not lived an unexamined life. You've done the job. Now, the problem is that a lot of the service is just hard. It's not everyday language. It was written a long time ago by people who didn't speak the way we speak. It's in another language altogether. So the imagery, a lot of it is there, but it may not be so accessible. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the images that are big on these holidays. First of all, the central image of Rosh Hashanah is God as King. Well, this may not sound so very relevant to most of us. How many kings are there in the whole world anymore? You know, I mean, there's like 6. I don't know. How many kings are there in the world? And most of them are ceremonial. They're not, they don't rule like kings. They're symbolic figureheads. So you got to understand that the prayers span 3,000 years of constant examination. So the thing about a king is we have to think about it a little bit differently. Judge, we understand. Judge is a little bit more accessible. Abraham called God the judge of all the earth. Albert Einstein chimes in. He talked about the almost fanatical love of justice that made him thank his stars that he was born a Jew. So you have kingship and justice, and Albert Einstein thanking his stars that he's born a Jew. Now, this was funny to people like me because when you read the Talmud, you find out that Jews don't believe in stars. You know, the Ein Mazalot Yisrael. Astrology works, it's for other people. That's the ancient view. But it takes away your power of choice if you rely on astrology. But Einstein was happy that he was born a Jew because of the stress on justice. Let me just read this to you. No people has believed as lucidly and as long as have Jews that life has a purpose, that this world is an arena of justice and human dignity, that we are, each of us, free and responsible and capable of sharing our lives in accordance with our highest ideals. We are here for a reason. We were created in love and forgiveness by the God of love and forgiveness who asked us to love and forgive. We're going to talk about forgiveness later on. But sometimes we don't live up to what we set up. But the idea here is no matter how many times you fail, you get another shot. The Hebrew word for sin is chet. It's an archery term meaning you missed the mark, something that most of you have heard before. But the idea of missing the mark means you get another shot. And we see it as you have as many shots as it takes to get it right until you don't. So we're going to be talking about Rosh Hashanah at the beginning of all these sessions. I don't want to really go too much further, but I will say that it's a mystery, and I'll leave it with this. You know, how we got to the Rosh Hashanah service of today from whatever it says in the Torah. In the Torah, in Leviticus, it has 2 verses. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people, speak to the Israelite people, and say, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe a complete rest, a sacred occasion commemorated with loud blasts. On the first, and in Numbers it says, on the 1st day of the 7th month you shall hold a sacred assembly, you shall do no laborious work, and you shall mark a day of blowing of the shofar, Yom Truah. But it doesn't tell you what they're blowing the shofar for, and it doesn't tell you what the whole significance of the day is. Not like Passover where you have matzah and maror and all the symbols of Passover and freedom. It's not like Sukkot where you have the booth, like it's a concrete thing. It's not even a story like Shavuot where we get the Torah. It's a big enigma wrapped in a riddle that's sort of a mystery. We don't know, so we're going to be looking at what exactly it is and some ways that maybe we can access it. So thanks for listening so far, and now we're going to get to our abbreviated preliminary service. So for those of you with the Siddur Sim Shalom for Shabbat and festivals, we are turning to page 65. For those of you who are just familiar with the service, it's Birchot HaShachar, the morning prayers you say as the sun's coming up, which is a little while ago, but we're getting to it now. The Jewish Standard Time. What do you? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasech bivina lahavchin ben yom uben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani b'tzamo. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasani ben chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivri. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish sharumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rakah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shasali kol tzorki. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hanoten le'yaif koach. Amen, amen, amen. Now we're going to continue on page 70, no, page 80. 71, well, page 72. Let's go with page 72. Since we don't always do Friday night services, and some of us like some of those tunes, let's have a little bit of Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbat, and we'll pick it up 4 lines from the bottom with Tzadik Katamar.
So from the top and then the bottom.
Oh, we can do that. Okay.
Okay, good, okay. Is that what you want to do? Good.
שיר לי יום השבת טוב, להודות לאדוני ולזמר, שמך לעליון ולזמר, לשמך העליון. מזמור שיר לי יום השבת טוב, להודות לאדוני ולזמר, לשמך לעליון ולזמר, לשמך העליון. להגיד בבוקר עשתך, ויאמרך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון וכינור. מזמור שיר לי יום השבת טוב, להודות לאדוני ולזמר, לשמך העליון ולזמר, לשמך העליון. And then 4 lines from the bottom. Dikata amar yifra, Yered Lebanon, Yizgeshet tulim, Viveit Adonai, Vechadrod Eloheinu, Havrichu od Yenuvan v'seiva d'shenim v'rananim yiyu lehagid ki yashar Adonai tzuri v'lo avladav. And on page 81, Mizmor Shir Hanukat Habayit LeDavid, a tale of psalm for the dedication of the temple. As I've said many, many times, this is such a great psalm for realizing it's the Scarlett O'Hara of psalms. You know, tomorrow is another day. You know, it's a safakta mispedi lemacholi. You've turned my eulogies into dancing for me. Pitakta sakiva tazrani simcha. You've turned my sackcloth into robes of joy. Lamanya zamecha chavod v'lo yidom, that I might sing your praise unceasingly. Adonai Elohei le'olam moldeka. Lord my God, I will praise you, I will thank you, I will acknowledge you forever. And now we're going to page 82, Mourner's Kaddish. Amen. Amen. Yeshmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Olomei Maya.
Yitparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudisha
Brechu.
le'ela min kol birachata v'shirata v'shpechata v'nechamata ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'romav v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael.
Amen. And we continue on page 83 with the beginning of Pesukei de Zimra, Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Oseh v'reshit, Baruch Omer v'yosef, Baruch Ozer l'mekayim, Baruch merachem al haaretz, Baruch merachem al habriot, Baruch mishalem sachar tov l'reav, Baruch chai la'ad, v'kayam lanetzach, Baruch podel u'matzil, Baruch Shemo. Yachid Chelomim Melech Meshubachim for Adei Shemo HaGadol. Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mehulal Batishbachot. And we'll continue going on page 85, down at the bottom. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu
Lehar
Kodsho. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romimu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romimu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho. Romimu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu Lehar Kodsho. And we'll continue on page 86, the top of the bottom paragraph. Hoshia et amecha, uvorech et nachalatecha, urem, 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 v'nasem ad haolam.
Hoshia
Et
et
amecha,
uvorech et nachalatecha,
urem, 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 v'nasem ad haolam. And we'll continue on page 88. And down at the, it's an acrostic prayer, it's in alphabetical order. We're going for the mem. Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim, ohev yamim liroto. Nitzor lishon chameira, usvatecha medaber mirma. Sur meira ve'aseh tov, baki shalom v'rodfehu. Mi ha'ish chafetz chaim, ohev yamim liroto. And we'll continue on 92. If it's comfortable, we rise for this, and we'll do, what verses are we doing today, Zev?
Let's do the first, second, third, the fourth set.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mitzrayim.
Lemakeh Mitzrayim, and we'll do 4 lines from there, and then we'll do the last 4 lines at the end. Lemakeh Mitzrayim, Lemakeh Mitzrayim.
What melody you want to do?
I have a.
Yeah.
Lemakeh Mitzrayim bivchoreihem, ki leolam chasto, v'yotzei Yisrael mitocham, ki leolam chasto, biyad chazaka uvizro nituya, ki leolam chasto, ligozer yam suf, ligzarim,
Ki
leolam chasto, sheb'shifleinu zachar lahanu, ki leolam chasto, yifrekenu mitzareinu, ki leolam chasto, noten lechem lechol basar, ki leolam chasto, hodu le'el hashamayim, ki leolam chasto. And we will now continue on page 96 and 97. We'll do the beginning and the end of Ashrei.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yalalucha selah.
Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo, Ashrei ha'am sh'Adonai Eloham.
Tila leDavid, amim chalam al kol kasher. Tila Adonai daber bi, vivarech kol basar, shem kodsho leolam va'ed. V'anachnu nivarech ya, me'adav yad olam. Hallelujah.
something that gets used in the Kedusha, pretty much every Kedusha, down at the bottom of 97. Yimloch Adonai Leolam, Elohai Etzion, Lidor Vador, Hallelujah. And on page 99, 5 lines from the bottom, Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, Ki nizgav shemo levado, hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayarem keret amo, tila lecho chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. And on page 100 in the middle, Hallelujah, 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 Bikocho, Hallelujah, Birki Auzo, Hallelujah, Vurotav, Hallelujah, Pirov Gudlo, Hallelujah, Take a shofar, Hallelujah, B'nevel v'chinor, Hallelujah, B'tofu machol, Hallelujah, B'minim v'ugav, Hallelujah, B'tziltzalei shama, Hallelujah, B'tziltzalei truah, Kol ha'neshama Hallelujah, 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 Kol ha'neshama Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. And on page 101, on the 3rd line down, Lechol Adonai hagidula v'hagivura v'tiferet v'netzach v'hod ki chol b'shamayim u'v'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'v'aretz Lechol Adonai hamamlacha v'hamid naseh v'chol lerosh. And we'll continue on page 102 with the Song of the Sea marching style. Oz yashir Moshe uvenei Yisrael et hashir hazot l'Adonai v'yomeru le'emor ashir l'Adonai ki ga'o ga'asus v'ravo rama vayam Ozi v'zimraya vayehi lishua ze'eli anvehu Elohei avi Amamenhu Adonai ish milchama Adonai shemo Markevod paro Chelo yara v'yam Char shel ishavtu v'yamsu. And we'll turn to page 104. Nishmat kol chai tivarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. And we'll go to the top of the middle paragraph. Ilufinu male shira, shira kayamu, shonenu ri nakamon, kamon galal. Ilufinu male shira, Male shira kayamu shonenu ri nakamon kamon galal. Ilufinu male shira kayamu shonenu ri nakamon kamon galal. Kamongalav, Kamongalav. And we'll continue on page 105 at the end of the first paragraph. Nehalecha u'nshebechecha u'nevarechecha u'nevarech Shem kodshecha ka'amor leDavid barchi nafshi et Adonai v'kol karovai et Shem kodsho ha'el b'tatzumo ruzecha hagadol b'chvod shemecha hagibor lanetzach v'hanora v'noratecha hamelech hayoshev al kisei ram v'nisa. Page 105, third paragraph, Shochinad.
Shochinad maram v'kadosh shemo.
Shochinad marom v'kadosh shemo.
V'chatu rananu tzadikim Adonai v'yisharim navatihila b'vishanim nidala v'divrei tzadikim nidbarach v'dilashon chazidim nidramam v'bekelev gedoshim tikadash v'makalot v'vivot amchavim Yisrael. V'hodol halal shabeach v'elromeim lehadel v'arech lekalis hakodivrei shivot v'tishbecha David menishai avdecha mishichecha.
If it's comfortable, please rise. Page 106, Yishtabach.
Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu. Birachot v'odot me'atav yodolam baruch atah Adonai El melech u'batishbachot El ahodot Adonai nivlaot Habalcher b'shivri zimra Melech elchei olamim.
Amen.
Yidgadav shemei rabah
Amen.
Yalvah divrach irotei V'yamelech malchutei B'chayecha v'yomecha V'chayidecha b'ez Yisrael Ba'agala V'vizmad kari v'imrel
Amen.
Yishmei Rabba Mivora L'olam lo me'olmaya Yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitbar v'yitrama v'yitnaseh v'yitadach v'yitale v'yitala Shemei dekudeshah
B'rechu.
V'yila min kol b'lachata v'shirata
Tushbechata v'nechemata damiram yoma. Amen. Page 107, the Baruch. Baruch Adonai Mvorach Liolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMivorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated, and please join me at the beginning of the first of two blessings before the Shema. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or vorei choshech se shalom uvorei et hakol. We continue to the bottom of the page silently.
Il kegecha v'inzuladecha efes bildecha midomela. Ikerkecha Adonai Eloheinu b'olam hazeh v'inzuladcha malkeinu l'chei olam haba. Efes b'tocha go'aleinu l'mod ha'mashiach v'edomelech ha'mosheinu l'chiyat ha'metim.
Page 108, El Adon.
El Adon HaKol Hamasim Baruch Mavarach Vevigo
Neshama
Neshama
Kalo V'tuvo Malei Olam Nadvona Sovevi Moto Hani Gael Chayot HaKodesh V'nedar V'chavod Ala Merkava Zechud Mishor Livnei Chiso Chesed V'rachamim Livnei Chevodo Tovim Me'orot Shebara Eloheinu Yitzhara B'dad V'vina Uvaskel U'achuk Glura Natan Bahem V'yachod V'ozim V'keref Nehivel Malay Ziv V'vigim Noga Na'eh Ziv Amechol HaOlam Semechim B'tzeitam B'sazim B'voam Ozim B'yehim Arizon Kahanam Be'er V'chava Nodim Lishmot Zala Verina Lezecher Malchuto Karal HaShemesh V'yizrachor V'avihid Kitzur Havana Shevach Nodim Lo Kaziv Amaram Tiveret V'gidula Svavim Yafarim V'chayot HaKodesh. And we read the top two paragraphs on 109 silently. La'el Hashem.
La'el Asher Zava Mikol HaMasim HaMashvit Alabash HaVakisei Kibur
We're on page 110.
Kulam Huvim, Kulam Birurim, Kulam Giborim, Kulam Osim, Mavravizon Kulam, Kulam Porkim it Bihem, Big Dush of the Dahara, Bijah Beziraham, Mavak Mishabhim, Farim Marisim, Magdishim, Mahamlirim. Eshemael Amalakado, Hage Borahan Aragadosh. Binachad Huach, Safar Ravnima, Kiddush Aklaham Gehadonim Yomimira, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Malacharetz Kivodo. Vavani v'chayot HaKodesh Raj Gadol Min Hasim L'Matzravim V'madam Shavachim V'yomrim Baruch Kivod Adonai B'Komo Le'el Barach Timatiteinu L'Melech Chai B'Klam
Zion Ta'ir, Or Chadash Zion Ta'ir, V'nizkeh Kulanu Me'era Li'oro, Me'era Li'oro.
Baruch Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
Yotzei HaMe'ora.
Amen. Page 111, our love song to God, Ahava Rabbah.
Ahava Rabbah Avdanu, Adonai Eloheinu, Chem Elagdol Avitera, Chamad Aleinu, Avinu Mageinu, Ba'avur Avudeinu, Shebarchu V'cha, Shebarchu V'cha, Avinu Mageinu, Vatilam Lechulkei Chaim, Tinichanenu Lamedeinu, Avinu Avarachamai, Marachim Rachim Aleinu, V'dein B'libeinu Lehavin, V'avinu Haskil Lishma, V'limod Lilamed, Ishmar velasod, ulikayim et kodivrei, Talmud Toratecha, v'ahava, v'ha'ereinu b'toratecha, Vida Bigli Bedu Bemismotecha, Viachil Vavinu, Viachava Lira Echemecha, Vila Nevosh, Violam Vahed, Vila Nevosh, Violam Vahed, Kiveshem, Vajacha, Agadu Vanura Bahadavlu, Nagila, Vinismecha, Nagila, Vinismecha, Vishuatecha, Vavinu, Vishalom.
Sit.
Meyariba Ganival Dares, Vitolichenu, Kami Meyu, Leyarzenu, Kiele Boel Yeshudata, Uvahanu Vacharita Mikula Vilaja, Vigira Vidanu, Leshimcha Gado, Sela, Beyemel, Liodalecha, Liachedecha, Beyava. Baruch Adonai,
Shemo.
Habachir B'Yamo Yisrael, B'Yahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Visharecha.
And the next two paragraphs just loud enough so you can hear it yourself. It'll help if you just move your lips a little. Vayayim Shemot Tishmo Zotai Shachim Zotai Chami Allah V'Adon V'Chol HaShem V'Natadim V'Toy Tzchem V'Toy Yerah Nachash Yisuf Sfot HaYishmer V'Chabed Yitel V'Chom Sotem V'Retem Elim Achar Yitzak Jesus Christ,
Adonai Elohechem Emet,
Tziv V'Nachon V'Chayim V'Yashav.
Lidur V'Adahu Kayam L'Shmakayam, V'Chisana Chalamalchudah, V'Beladah Lehad Kayamet. Rav Chaim V'Yimnei Melech L'Yilad. Mahakenu Melech Avodeinu, Golenu Govel Avodeinu, Yotzvenu Tzveshuadeinu, Bodenu Matzilenu, Melam Shemecha,
Page 114.
Emeratahu Rishon, Emeratahu Acharon, Ubibaladecha Ilanu Melech, Melech Goel Mashiach. Ubibaladecha Ilanu Melech, Melech Goel Mashiach.
Mitzrayim galtanu Elohenu v'mibir avedim p'nitanu.
Tilo Lel Elyon, Baruch Hu Mivorach, Moshe b'nei Yisrael echanu shira v'simcha rabba v'yamilchula.
Please rise.
Mi chamocha ba'ilim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nahur adilo, osei v'eleh. Shira chadasha sheb'chul kelim b'shimcha zvatayam, yachad kulam haduvim lichu v'yamrel, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Tzor Yisrael, Kulma be'ezrat Yisrael, Zedei Chudumecha, Yehuda v'Yisrael, Go aleinu, Adonai tzva'ot shema gidas Yisrael, Baruch Adonai, Yisrael.
The Amidah said silently and standing from pages 115A or B, skipping page 116 and continuing 117 to 120. It's a silent prayer. You can add whatever's in your heart to whatever's on the page. The reader's repetition of the Amidah begins on page 115A. You may remain seated if you want to be.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, v'Elokei Yaakov, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanor Ha'el Gomel Chazadim Tovim v'Gonei HaGol, v'Docher Chasdei Avot, Ha'mevi Goel Livnei V'neim, Liman Shivo B'Yava, Melech Ozil Moshil Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham,
Amen.
atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Melchem Edim atah Rav L'Hoshia, Moharid atah, Mechal Kel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayim Edim B'Rachamim Rabim, Zamech Nachlim V'Rovech Olim, U'Madir Asurim, U'Mekayim Ebed Adali Shenei Afar, Michamucha B'Gilurot, U'Mido Melach, Melech Mimi, ומיכאל, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמנה דלה חיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני,
Baruch Shema.
בחיי המתים.
Amen. Page 116, please rise.
נקדיש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, כגדו ביד נביאך, וקרא זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך הארץ כבודו. אז בקרש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעך, מתנשאים ולמצרבים, ולמדם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מכינו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כמחכים אנחנו לך, מתי תמלוך בציון. בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתקדש ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור לנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ועינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך. Mashiach Tzidkecha David, Mashiach Tzidkecha Yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Zion Hallelujah. L'dur v'Adonai yitgalecha L'netzach netzach v'neshadecha nagdish V'shivchacha l'hed mipinu l'musala b'hed Ki amach kalav hakadosh Ata Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh.
Amen. Page 117.
Yismach Moshe b'matnarchecha G'yeven Ne'eman karatalo Kelil tiferet berosh Sonatata b'yamda levanecha Al Har Sinai Shnei luchot avadim Horid b'yado V'chatuv b'hem Shemirat Shabbat V'chatuv b'hem Shemirat Shabbat V'chatuv b'hem Shemirat Shabbat V'chigatu b'toratecha V'shamru v'nei Yisrael Et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat V'da'adam b'rit olam V'hini uvein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam B'nei uvein b'nei Yisrael Oti le'olam Ki sheishet yamim Asa Adonai Et ha-shamayim V'et ha'aretz V'yom hashvi Shabbat v'yi navash V'yom hashvi Shabbat v'yi navash V'lo nidada Adonai Eloheinu G'me'at Eloheinu Chato Malkin L'David Zehilim V'gam Nuchato L'Ashkinu Arehilim Ki L'Yisrael Amcha Nidata B'Yavaha L'Zerei HaGav Asher Bambaharda, Amigadeshevi, Kolamis Bividal, Mitsuvecha, Vashviratitabo, Kirajdo, Hebnadi Hamima, Dagarada, Zeher, the Masevereshi, Eloheinu, Velohi Avotinu, Ritzevim Nuchateinu, Kadusheinu, Bemitzvotecha, Vitein Chel Gidul B'Toratecha, Sabeinu B'Tzuvecha, V'Samreinu B'Shuvatecha, V'Taher, Libeinu, Li'Ovlecha Be'yemet, V'Hanchilinu Adonai Eloheinu, V'Yachava U'V'Raza, Shabbat Kodechecha V'Yanu Chulva Yisrael, V'Kadesh Shemecha, Baruch Atah Adonai,
Baruch Shemo.
V'Kadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Page 118.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'Amcha Yisrael v'Tefillah
V'Hashem
v'Ahavotah v'Beitecha. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu b'Amcha Yisrael v'Tefillah v'Hashem v'Ahavotah v'Beitecha v'Tefillah v'Yavadeka v'Beratzon V'Ratzon Damid Avodat Yisrael Amecha U'Tefilata V'Yavadeka V'Ratzon V'Ratzon Damid Avodat Yisrael Amecha Ritzei V'Techesena Hinei V'B'Shevcha L'Yisrael B'Rachamim Baruch Atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
Hamachas Yeshachinato L'Tzion Manim Anachnu L'Tatavon.
שאנחנו מודים לך ברוכי על ההודעות.
Atah Gilach L'Rachamecha V'Merachim Gilad Avachasadecha Me'olam Givinu La.
Middle of page 119.
V'Yahok L'Amid Brach V'Tvam Chamagnat V'Lila Ma'ed V'Chol HaChaim Yadu Chazela V'Yallah Chimcha B'Yemeh V'Yelashvat Nezratinu Zela Baruch Atah Adonai Adam Simcha L'Chol Eliodo
Amen.
Eloheinu Elohi Avodeinu Barachim V'Bracha HaMishulech B'Torah G'Davayim Moshe Avdecha HaMurami Pironu V'Anav Kol Hanim G'Doshecha Gamor Yivarechecha Adonai Yishmerecha
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yair Adonai Panav Elecha V'Chuneka
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yis Adonai Panav Elecha V'Yazehim Lecha Shalom
Ken Yehi Ratzon. Page 120.
Sim Shalom
Tova
Uracha
Ba'olam
Ba'olam
Chen
V'Chesed V'Rachamim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Al Kol Yisrael Amecha V'Achinu Avinu Kulanu Kechas V'Ar Banecha Kivir Banecha Nada Lanu Adonai Eloheinu Sim Shalom Sim Shalom Tova uvracha ba'olam chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol Yisrael amecha Torah chaim yavad chesed v'yavad chesed tzedaka v'racha v'rachamim v'chayim v'shalom v'shalom sim shalom Tova uvracha ba'olam chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu V'alko Yisrael, V'alko Yisrael, Amecha, V'dam Beinecha Livarech, Et Amecha Yisrael, V'chalei, V'chashach, V'shlomecha, V'galasim Shalom, Tova Uvracha Ba'olam Chen, Ba'chesed V'rachamim V'rachamim Aleinu, V'alko Yisrael, V'alko Yisrael, Amecha, Baruch Adonai, Hamivarech Namo Yisrael, Ba'al Shalom.
Amen. And we bid a fond adieu to Shacharit, and we do it with the Kaddish Shalem on page 138.
Yigdav Yigdash Mirabah.
Amen.
Yalmadi Vrachu Devram Nechbach Devachayachod V'mechod V'chel Chaved Yisrael Baglav Yizman Karvi V'Yimrel. Amen. Yesh Mirabah Mivarach V'Olam Ulamel Maya Yidbarach Yidbar Vishtabach Yidbar V'Minasev V'Dar V'Dalev V'Dalal Shubei D'Kodesha Eila Mikol Berchata V'Shivata Shivachata V'Nechavata D'Amiram V'Dalav V'Yimrel.
Amen.
Yidgabel Sotan V'Odon D'Chol Yisrael Kadam Avahon V'Yishmaya V'Yimrel.
Amen.
Yishlam Rabim Shemai V'Chaim Aleinu V'Agol Yisrael V'Yimrel.
Amen.
Azeh Shalom B'Mnamav V'Yazeh Shalom Aleinu V'Yalko Yisrael V'Yimrel. Amen.
Shkoich.
Baruch Tiyeh.
Moving right along, no commercial breaks. Maybe we should put announcements in,
Yeah, not a bad idea,
Yeah.
but that's no break for you.
no, that's no break for me. Maybe I could pre-record them. Okay. We are moving on to the Torah service on page 139.
In kamacha v'Elohim Adonai v'in gema'azecha malechutecha malechu kol olamim u'memshadecha b'chodor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai imlach Le'olam va'ed Adonai oz li'amo yidin Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Avarachamim hitiv avirtzonecha et Zion. Tivneh chomot Yerushalayim. Tivneh chomot Yerushalayim. Kivecha Livad Badagnu Melech Eravin Isa Adon Alami. Vayivin Sohara Vayamer Moshe Kulma Adonai V'yafutzu Oivecha V'yanusu Misanecha V'panecha Ki
Mitzion Teitzei Torah,
Ki Mitzion
Teitzei Torah, Devar Adonai, Yerushalayim,
Baruch
Shanatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shanatan Torah, Torah, Amo Yisrael, Ushato. And we will continue on page 140, second paragraph, Be'anarachetz. Be'anarachetz, Ishmei Kadisha, Kadisha Yakira, Eimar Tushbechan, Be'anarachetz, Be'anarachetz, Ishmei Kadisha, Well, a number of interesting things have happened this week in the history of the Jewish people. Let's take a look at some of them, shall we? On August the 2nd, 1492,
First Jew-bought passage on
Yeah.
Santa Maria.
well, yes. I have here that the Jews leave Spain, 1492. I guess they were just fed up. Well, no, they were kicked out. I don't usually go into the bad things that happened to Jews, but this was immortalized in the poem. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and Spain kicked out all of its Jews. So, and you know the Hebrew date that it happened on?
Tisha B'Av?
On Tisha B'Av, yes. They scheduled it. Ferdinand and Isabella, they scheduled the Jews' departure. They left, yeah, right. Okay, August the 3rd, 1937, the 20th World Zionist Congress was held. And this is almost comical, but it's one of those things we endured. August the 4th, 1278, Pope Nicholas III required Jews to attend sermons with the goal of converting them. And the Jews just, they didn't get it. You know, they stuffed candle wax in their ears so they wouldn't hear it. Yeah.
They probably said, we don't even attend the sermons our own rabbis give.
Well, back then they did. Yeah. Yeah, it was a different tradition. But yeah, they stuffed stuff in their ears so they wouldn't hear, and they'd sit there and they'd fall asleep. It didn't work out very well for anybody. And there was a massacre. We can skip that. August the 6th, 1799, Marcus Eliezer Bloch, a famous ichthyologist, was born. You know what an ichthyologist is?
Ichthyologist?
Ichthyologist. I-C-H.
The guy who studies bugs?
No, fish.
Oh,
Fish. I think he might have been the first guy to invent the gefilte fish, actually. Yeah. That was.
I guess it's gefilte fish sounds better than blockfish.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, well, because it's round mostly.
Yeah.
If only they had made it into bricks, then the blockfish might have. Yeah. Well, August the 7th, 1955, Bar Ilan University was founded. And today is August the 8th, 1653. I don't know who this was. I'd like to know because he has a strange name. Jacob Christian Basnage. Sort of like got a Jewish first name and a not Jewish middle name. I tend to think he probably wasn't Jewish unless he was trying to fit in. I don't know. But anyway, he was the author of the first modern history of Jews. Yeah. We don't usually read that. We usually read the Gretz or what's his name? Ben Sasson. The Ben Sasson is what that's the big, like, that's a brick, that's a block. Okay. Well, if you haven't already done this, I want you to take a deep breath, exhale, don't hold it in too long, but try and let everything in the world go for a little bit. You know, this is Shabbos time, this is Shabbat, this is where you stop being creative and just acknowledge being created. This is where you fit into the flow. This is, you know, you're not trying to do too much. Yeah, if you set things up ahead of time, you can enjoy the day very nicely. You don't have to think right now about COVID-19 or the economy or the unemployment or Congress or any of those things that make the news. Those are things that you'll get back to after Shabbat. But right now, turn them off. And let's do a little Torah, shall we? We're in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim. And, you know, Devarim has a number of differences in language between it's the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, and the rest of the Torah. And if you look at it right, it could change the way we look at the whole religion. in comparison to other systems. In particular, Deuteronomy changes the way we look at the concepts of love and forgiveness. You know, a lot of people, I've had this my whole life, have this idea, even if they're Jewish, they have this idea that Judaism is a religion of justice and law and very, very strict. Eye for an eye and all that stuff. And Christianity is a religion of forgiveness and love. And I'm not going to go too deeply into this. I'm not going to cite all the places in the New Testament where the founder of the religion gets angry. But there are examples of him losing his temper quite a few times, especially with at the temple with the money changers and the selling of sacrifices and things, and with his disciples. But just to spend a minute on the other side of the equation, let's take a look at some of the examples how the Torah sees these ideas, love and forgiveness. There are a number of examples in our Parsha today. In chapter 7, verses 12 and 13, if you pay attention to these laws and are careful to follow them, then the Lord your God will keep his covenant of love, et habrit v'et chesed, with you, as he swore to your ancestors. He will love you and bless you and increase your numbers. And also in today's Parsha, in chapter 10, verses 14 and 15, to the Lord your God belong the heavens, even the highest heavens, the earth and everything in it. Yet the Lord set his affections on your ancestors and loved them, and he chose you, their descendants, above all the other nations as it is today. And if we go back a week, in chapter 4 it says, because God loved your ancestors and chose their descendants after them, God brought you out of Egypt by his presence and his great strength. I mean, there's lots of references to love in the Torah. The root for the word love. Do you know the word for love? Ahava. Ahava, rabba, yeah. Or ahavat olam at night. You know, it means, it's the word we use for love. One of the ways you can tell how important a word is how many times it's used. The words with the root of aleph, hey, vav, vet, bet. In Exodus, you find it twice. In Leviticus, you find it twice, both in chapter 19. That's, I believe, Kedoshim, be holy because I, the Lord, am holy. The word with that root, aleph, hey, vet, in the book of Numbers does not even appear. And in Deuteronomy, it appears 23 times. I mean, it just dwarfs. The concept of forgiveness doesn't really even exist in the ancient world. The first recorded instance in all of ancient literature for someone who was wronged, explicitly forgiving someone else. I've said this before. Do you remember?
In all of ancient literature?
In all of ancient literature, including the Torah. The first time it gets mentioned is Joseph forgiving his brothers. After he says, I'm your brother Joseph, after they didn't know who he was. And he says, don't worry about it, I forgive you. Because God brought me here to save you, basically. And we're here because of that. However, the first instance of God forgiving people is after the sin of the golden calf. So even in the New Testament, when Jesus is asked, what are the two important precepts? He answers, love your neighbor as yourself, and love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, and with all your soul. And where do these ideas come from? Leviticus chapter 19 and Deuteronomy 6. So if the concept of love in the Western world has a text, that text is in Hebrew. And this is a real game changer. We're told to love our neighbor as ourselves, to act on our neighbor's behalf as selfishly, actually, as on our own behalf. Buddhism teaches through what a lot of Buddhist monks, including the Thich Nhat Hanh, who I used to follow a little bit, what they call mindful living, always considering all the angles and possibilities and consequences. But it has nothing to do with our relationship to God, because Buddhism doesn't have a God being at the core of its teachings. But the Torah presents us with a paradigm shift for the ancient world. The Torah insists that all the parts of the universe are not out to get us. Do you get the change? Before the Torah, people's view of religion was the gods are out to get us. Life is just too hard for this to be not planned. That the universe is hostile to human beings. The Torah comes along and says, no, you're the reason we made the universe. We're here because somebody wanted us to be here. Someone who cares about us, someone who watches over us, seeks our well-being. That's how we're supposed to look at ourselves and how we're supposed to look at each other. This love of God translates to a caring for each other and to treat each other well. In Deuteronomy chapter 10, it says, "For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awesome God who shows no partiality and accepts no bribes. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the stranger, gives the stranger food and clothing. So you must love the stranger, for you yourselves were strangers in the land of Egypt." In short, God created the world in love and forgiveness and asks us to love and forgive others. This was a singular point, a singularity in the history of human development. There is, however, an obvious question. Why is it that love, which plays such a great part in the book of Deuteronomy, isn't so obvious or evident in the earlier books of Exodus and with the exception of Kedoshim, Leviticus, and Bamidbar, Numbers? It's not there at all. So, being Jewish, the best way of answering that question is to ask another question. And that's what we do. Why is it that forgiveness plays no part, at least in the surface of the narrative, in the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, until practically the very end? God does not forgive Adam and Eve or Cain, though he mitigates their punishments. Forgiveness does not figure in the stories of the flood, the Tower of Babel, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities of the plain. Abraham's plea, you might be thinking about, is that the cities be spared if they contain 50, 40, 35, whatever, 10 righteous people. But it's not a plea to forgive them. It just says don't kill them. A case could be made, I suppose, for Esau forgiving Jacob, but there's more forgetting than forgiving. Divine forgiveness makes its first appearance in the book of Exodus. This is divine forgiving, God forgiving humans. After Moses' successful plea in the wake of the golden calf, and then it's institutionalized in Yom Kippur, which is coming up faster than we'd like to think. But not before. Now, it's true that Judaism tends to formalize things and ritualize things, and some people think that takes out the meaning of them, so to speak. If I ask you to forgive me, you have to say the words, "I forgive you," 3 times for me to get it. And if I ask you to forgive me, 3 times and you don't forgive me, I'm considered forgiven. It's all very formulaic, it's all, and if you do this, this is the judgment. So there's something to be said for the over-ritualization of things. But the reason that in the Torah, that God doesn't forgive people until the golden calf is that God doesn't forgive human beings until human beings learn to forgive one another. Genesis ends with Joseph forgiving his brothers, and only after that can God come around to forgiving human beings. And so it is with love. There's lots of love in the Bible. There's lots of love. I know that there's lots of the word love in Deuteronomy. We said that. Genesis has lots of love. Abraham loves Isaac. Isaac loves Esau. Rebekah loves Jacob. Jacob loves Rachel. He also loves Joseph. There's personal love in plentiful supply, but almost all of the loves in Genesis turn out to be divisive. They don't work out. They leave the tension between Jacob and Esau, between Rachel and Leah, between Joseph and his brothers. And implicit in Genesis is a profound observation missed by most Bible scholars. Love in and of itself, real love, personal and passionate, the kind of love that we find so much in the writings of the prophets, as well as Shir HaShirim, the greatest love song in the Tanakh, perhaps the greatest love song ever, and not the detached, generalized love called agape that you see in ancient Greece. Love is not enough to sustain a society. Love can divide as well as unite. You might be going there, well, that's not true love if it divides. But that's how it's called. The whole history of it's the history of love, and most frequently leads to conflict. So it doesn't become a major motif until we reach the integrated social, moral, political vision of Deuteronomy, which considers the people on a national scale, and it combines love and justice. We'll see the famous words, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, in a few weeks. Justice, justice shall you pursue. Tzedek, justice, turns out to be another key word in Deuteronomy. It's 18 times in Deuteronomy. It's 4 times in Exodus, not at all in Numbers. And Leviticus, only in chapter 19, Kedoshim, the only chapter that also contains the word love. So in other words, in Judaism, love or mercy and justice go hand in hand. And this is noted by the philosopher Simon May. He says here, what we have to note, because it's fundamental to the history of Western love, is the remarkable and radical justice that underlies the love commandment of Leviticus. Not a cold justice in which due deserts are mechanically handed out, but the justice that brings the other as an individual with needs and interests into a relationship of respect. All our neighbors are to be recognized as equals to ourselves before the law of love. Justice and love, therefore, become inseparable. Love without justice leads to conflict, rivalry, and eventually to hate. Justice without love is devoid of the humanizing forces of compassion and mercy, and we need them both. This unique ethical vision, the love of God for humans and of humans for God, translated into an ethic of love toward both neighbors and strangers. That's the foundation of Western civilization and its abiding glory. I'll mention just very briefly before I conclude the first and second blessings before the Shema. The first one always talks about the creation of the heavens, the sun and the moon and the stars, and how perfectly they work. And the idea behind it, when it was being put together, may have been that when things work the way they're supposed to, like the clockwork of the universe, we call that justice. If it's not working, we try and correct it. That's where you get your correctional systems out of justice. Justice, when things work, we call that justice. We, on the human level, are charged with correcting things when they don't work like they're supposed to. The second blessing is always about love. And it's always the first word, Ahava Rabbah, Ahavat Olam. God gave us a system to make the world work physically and emotionally, and justice tempered with love, and love tempered with justice. And we only need to look at the world to see that principle in action and how much that principle is needed. And here it is in the book of Deuteronomy, and nobody ever wonders who wrote the book of law, but we all know who wrote the book of love. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, Yashikah.
Okay. So now you want to take out your big red chumash if you have one at home, or your Hertz chumash, which I don't know the page numbers to, but we are starting with Akev, and we'll find it here. Okay, here, almost there. Akev, page 1037. Moses continues in this, his last speech before the people of Israel get into the land of Canaan. And in the first Aliyah today, Moses tells the people that if they obey the rules that God has given, then God will live up to his end of the bargain and bless the people with abundance, and they will inherit the land. And neither the people, the beasts, nor the land will be barren, and they will suffer no illness, and everything will just be fine. Page 1037.
V'hayaha ekev tishme'u, Eid hamishpatim ha'ele ushmartem basitem otam, v'shamar Adonai Elohecha lecha, et ha'brit v'et ha'chesed, asher nishbal avotecha, v'hivcha uveirachecha v'yirbecha, uveirach peri vitnecha, uferi admatecha, Tigancha v'tiroshcha v'yitzarecha, sigar alafecha, v'astrod sonecha, al adam asher nishbal avotecha latet lach, baruch tiyeh mikol ha'amim, v'yevecha, agar v'akara uviv, hemtecha, v'zir Adonai mimcha kol choli, v'chol madvei, Mitzrayim ha'ra'im, asher yadata, Lo yisimam bach u'nitanam bechol zonecha v'achata et kol ha'amim asher Adonai Elohecha notei lach lo tachos eincha alehem v'lo tavod et Eloheim ki mokeishu lach.
All right. Don't worship other gods. That's a trap. We're on page 1038 with verse 17, and here Moses again gives the instructions to conquer the peoples in the land with extreme prejudice. Have no fear, for God is on your side. Remember the miracles in Egypt, and God will help you here as well.
Ki tomar b'ilvavacha rabbi magoyim ha'ele mimeni Echa ochal hol risham lo tira mehem zachor tizkor Eid asher asah Adonai Elohecha lefaro l'chol Mitzrayim hamasod hagdolot asher alu einecha v'otod v'amoftim v'yarach chazaka v'azro ha'nitzuyah asher otziach Adonai Elohecha kin ya'azeh Adonai Elohecha l'chol ha'amim asher ata yarem ibnehem v'gam et atzirah yishalach Adonai Elohecha bam Anavod hanisharim v'anistarim ipanecha lo tarot mipnehem ki Adonai Elohecha b'kirbecha el gadol v'norah.
I think you're going to hear that phrase a lot during the holidays, El Gadol V'Norah, great and mighty God, fearful, awesome, I think that's right, that's the word, is awesome.
Awesome.
Awesome, yeah. Dude. We're on page 1038, verse 22, and now comes an interesting thing. Moses here tells the people that God will not just hand over the land to them. The conquest is going to take some time. And the reason that is if all the people left all at once, wild animals would take over. But God will, at the appropriate time, put panic in the hearts of the enemies and their kings, and then go down and burn their images and their gods. Bring one of them into your house, though, one of their images or gods, and you will be treated like the people that you are to conquer. It won't be pretty. just verse 22.
V'nashal Adonai Elohecha et hagoyim ha'el b'panecha me'at me'at lo tuchal galota maher pentir be'alecha chayat hasadeh unetana Adonai Elohecha lefanecha v'ama mihuma ha'gedola adi shamdam v'natan malchehem biyadecha v'vadeti ta et shema mitachar hashamayim lo yityatsev ish b'fanecha adish midcha otam Pisile Elohim tisrefun ba'ish lo tachmod kesev v'zahav alehem lakach ta'alach pentivake ishbo ki to'avat Adonai Elohecha hu v'lo tavi to'eva el beitecha v'yita cherem kamohu shagehit tishagtzenu v'ta'iv t'ta'avenu ki cheremu.
Okay. We're on to chapter 8. We're on page 1039 at the beginning of chapter 8. And thriving in the new homeland is dependent on keeping the commandments, the mitzvot. Another startling development in this passage is that Moses tells the people that God made them walk for 40 years in the desert for a reason. It was to test them through hardship in order to know what is in their hearts, whether they would keep the commandments. First, he made you hungry, and then he gave you manna to eat. And manna was something no one had ever seen before. And that was to show you that people do not live by bread alone. That's right. That's what the original context of that phrase means. This is where it comes from. It means that you don't live, man does not live by bread alone. No, there's manna.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Kol ha-mitzvah asher Anochi mitzavcha hayom tishmeru la'asod l'matichun urivtem uvatem v'rishtem et haaretz asher nishbat Adonai la'avotechem v'zacharta et kol haderech asher holichecha Adonai Elohecha zeh ba'im shana b'midbar l'man anodcha l'nasodcha l'hadat et asher bilvavacha hadishmar mitzvoto imlo vaye'anecha vayarifecha v'yachich et haman asher lo yadata v'lo yida'un avotecha leman hodiachacha ki lo al halechem levadam yicheh adam ki al kol motza fi Adonai yicheh adam.
So now we're on page 1040. It's not a tax form. Verse 4. And in this, here's another interesting thing that happened in the 40 years. There was a sign of a miracle. The people's clothes and their footwear never wore out. You know, just like God provided a well that followed Miriam and the people as they went along the desert, they also, I think, was a shoe city.
Yeah.
That a foot locker that. But their clothing and their footwear never wore out. But whatever they ate and wore, the pickings will be good in the land to come. There'll be no shortage of food, clothing, metals, or anything they could want. And it says here, verse 10, remember to give thanks after you eat. Verse 10 says, V'achalta v'savata uverachta. Eat, be satisfied, and give thanks. And it's here that this is the commandment to say Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals. So when we say the Birkat HaMazon and we finally get together and we have one of our Kiddush lunches or our Friday night meals together, when we say Birkat HaMazon, you'll see it in verse 10. That's where it comes from.
Sim ladecha lo valta me'alecha v'raglecha lo vatzeka ze 40 shana v'yadata im levavecha ki kasher yaser ish et beno Adonai Elohecha miyasreka v'shamarta et mitzvot Adonai Elohecha lalechet bidrachav u'lira'oto ki Adonai Elohecha meviachacha el eretz tova asher nachalei ma'im ayanot Utuhamod yotzim babibika uvahar Eretz chita usuara vegefen uteina v'rimon Eretz zayit shemen udvash Eretz asher lavem iskenut תאכל בה לחם לא תחסר כל בה, ארץ אשר אבניה ברזל, ומהרריה תחצוב נחושת, ואכלת ושבעת, וברכת את אדוני אלוהיך על הארץ הטובה אשר נתת לך.
I didn't want to interfere with the reading, so I went like this when we got to V'yachalta v'savata v'rakta.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you know, you got the Achata, V'savata, V'erakta, et Adonai Elohecha. It's right there.
right? Al ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach. Little association. Okay, on the sixth aliyah, the sixth aliyah begins with verse 11 on page 1041. It says, "Be careful about being too complacent, because you might forget that it was God, the creator of the universe, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and fed you in the wilderness and took care of you and brought you here. Don't ever think you did this by yourself. God did this because he made a promise to your ancestors. It has very little to do with you." But that doesn't mean you can't have a connection.
Isha meher lecha pen tishchach et Adonai Elohecha levil tishemor mitzvotav v'mishpatav v'chukotav asher anochti mitzvavcha hayom pen tochal v'savata uvatim tovim tivne v'yashavda uvkaracha utzoncha yirbiyun v'chesed v'zahav yirbelach v'chol asher lecha yirbeh v'ram levavecha v'shachachta et Adonai Elohecha hamotziachacha me'eretz Mitzrayim מבית עבדים, המוליכך במדבר הגדול והנורא, נחש שרף ועקרב, וצמאון אשר אין מים, המוציא לך מים מצורך למיש. המאכילך מן במדבר, אשר לא ידעון אבותיך, למען ענותך ולמען נעשותך, להיטיבך באחריתך. ואמרת בלבביך, כוחי ועוצם ידי, עשה לי את החיל הזה. וזכרת את אדוני אלוהיך, כי הוא הנותן לך כוח לעשות חיל, למען הקים את בריתו, אשר נשבע לאבותיך, כיום הזה.
Okay, now for the seventh aliyah today, it's on starts at page 1042. It's chapter 8 of Deuteronomy, verse 19. And if you ever do forget, it says, if you ever do forget that it was God who brought you here and not you, you will disappear from this good land. It's only because of God that you will be able to defeat the nations that currently live in the land. And this is going to go a little bit into chapter 9.
והיה, אם שכח תשכח את אדוני אלוהיך והלכת אחרי אלוהים אחרים ועבדתם והשתחווית להם, היית תבכם היום כי אבות עובדון כגויים אשר אדוני מעביד מפניכם כן תעבדון עקב לא תשמעון בקול אדוני אלוהיכם שמע ישראל אתה עובר היום את הירדן לבוא לרשת גויים גדולים ועצומים ממך, ערים גדולות ובצורות בשמיים, עם גדול ורב בני ענקים, אשר אתה ידעת ואתה שמעת, מתייצב לפני בני ענק, וידעת היום כי אדוני אלוהיך הוא העובר לפניך איש אוכלה, הוא ישמידם, הוא יכניס לפניך, והורשתם ועבדתם מהר, כאשר דיבר אדוני לך.
Okay. So before we get to the Haftorah, yeah, we're going to do the Mishaberach. And needless to say, there's lots of people out there needing a prayer. And let's give it to them.
משברך אבותינו, מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishebeirach imotenu, mikor habiracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing, refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Okay. Now, for the Haftarah, the text begins on 1056. It's from the book of Isaiah, it's chapter 49, and this is the second in a series of 7 Haftarot of consolation that we read after Tisha B'Av leading up to Rosh Hashanah. It starts by saying, "The Lord has forsaken me," and it has some of the same language as the book of Lamentations that we read on Tisha B'Av. But the Haftarah ends with words of comfort and encouragement. Truly the Lord has comforted Zion. When we ask if God can forget his people, we're told, can a mother forget her infant? You might think you have reason to despair, but don't. God will not forgive you. God will not forget you. And there are more comforting images throughout this reading, and I invite us all to follow along, page 1056.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'neviim tovim v'ratzah v'divreim, hanemarim b'meher. Baruch atah Adonai habacher b'torah v'Moshe avdo, v'Yisrael amo v'nviei hamer v'tzedek.
Amen.
V'adomer Tzion azavani Adonai v'Adonai shechaychani, hadishkach yishallah mirachem ben bidna, kamelet ishkachna, v'anochi lo eshkachich, hinal kabayim chakotich, chomotayich negdi tamid, miharu banayich, miharsayich umacharivayich, mimech yitzeu, si saviv einayich ori, kulaham nikbetzu ba'ulah, chaen aninu madonai, ki chulam gadi dilbashi, udkashrim kakala, ki chavotahir, v'shamamotahir, veretari sutehir, ki atad terzit, tetri miyashiv, rachacho mivalayir. Od yoru vaznayir, b'nei shigulayir, tzarli amakom, gishali ve'sheva, v'amard bilvaveich, mi aled li, edelev ani shechula, v'gal muda, gola v'sura, ve'elem igidel, heinani, nisharti levadi, ele ephahim, ko amar Adonai Elohim, hine esa el goyim yadi, ve'lami marim nisi, ve'viu vanayich, v'chodsen, u'v'notayich al kativ, tinasena, ve'ayul milachim omnayich, v'sarotehem menikotayich, abayim eretz, ishtachavulach v'faraglayich, yalachechu, v'yadat, ki ani Adonai, asher lo yivoshu kovai. Hayukach migibor malkoach, v'imshavid tzadik yimalehid kichaho, amar Adonai, gam shavi gibor yukach, malkoach haritz yimalid, v'edrivei chanochi ariv, v'edbanayich chanochi oshia. V'achati et monayich et bisaram, v'che'asi histamam yishkarun, v'yadu chobasar, ki ani Adonai Moshiach, v'go alecha vir Yaakov, ko amar Adonai zeh, sefer kritu dimechem, asher shilachtia, omi minoshai, asher macharti erchem lo, hin bavonotechem nimkartem, uvifish eichem shulcha imchem, Maduabati Venish Karati Veinone Akatsor Kotsrayadi Mipedud Vimain Bichoach Hatsil Hein Bagarati Achariv Yam Asim Neharot Midbar Tivash Digata Mein Mahim Vatamahod Batsama Abishamayim Kadrud Visak Asim Kisutam Adonai Elohim Natali Lilo Lishon Limudim Ladat Lautet Yaif Davar Yair Babokir Yair Li Ozen Lishmoa Kalimudim Adonai Elohim Patach Li Ozen Vadochi Lo Mariti Achur Lo Nisugauti Kivehi Natati Lemakim Lechayai Lemortim Panai Lohi Istarti Mikli Mahod Varo Vadon Elohim Yazar Li Alki Lo Nichlamti Alkin Samti Vanai Gachalamish Veidagi Lo Evos Karov Matstiki Mayariviti Namda Yachad Mival Mishpati Yigash Elai Hey Nadonai Elohim Yazarli Mihu Yarshi Eini Hein Kulam Kibeged Ivlu Ahash Yo Chilehim Mivachem Yirehi Adonai Shomea Bikol Avdo Asher Allah Chashechim Veinogalo Yiva Ivtach B'Shem Adonai Ve'yishayin Be'eloham Hein Kochem Kodchesh Masrei Zikod Lechu Bor Eshchem Uvezikod Be'artem Miadi Haitazolachem Lema'at Siva Tishkavun Shimu Elai Rodvei Tzedek B'Vakshei Adonai Habitu Etzor Chutzavtem Velvakevet Bor Nukartem Habitu El Avraham Avichem Vel Sarah Tichol Elchem Ki Echad Girativ Vavarachehu Ve'arbehu Ki Nicham Adonai Tzion Nicham Kol Charvoteha Vayasem Midbaraha Ke'eden Varvataha Ki Gan Adonai Sason V'Simcha Yimatzehi Baha Todah Ve'kol Zimra Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam tzor kol abim tzadim chodorot hayala nemahad omer yoseh amidaber mekayim shikol divarav emedvat tzedek nemahad atalu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'amadim divarecha v'divarecha midvarecha chol yashuv rekam ki amelech lemav rachaman atah baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
Hela neman bechol divarav
Amen.
Rachim atzion ki beit chayim luvalalu v'nefesh toshiyaha b'mirav yaminu baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
Misamech Zion b'vaneha
Amen.
Samchinu Adonai Eloheinu meleahu hanavi avdecha v'malchut beit David mishichecha b'mhiraya v'aha v'yageli be'idu al gizah yishev zar v'lo yinchalu ahad acherim et kivodo ki v'shem kodechecha nishbad alaha Shalach b'nei rahal elam v'ed baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo.
Magid David
Amen.
HaTorah v'alavodah v'adivim el yom HaShabbat hazeh Shenatat alanu Adonai Eloheinu l'gerzav l'mnucha lecha v'hodol tivaret ala kol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach v'mevarchim otach yibarach shimcha b'fi kol chai tamid le'olam v'ed baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
v'kadesh HaShabbat
Amen. Now we're turning back to our Sidors, Sidurim. And on page 148, we'll read the last paragraph on the page as a prayer for our country. May this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore, And let us say,
Amen.
And we'll, from 2 lines up in the Hebrew, Lo yisagoy al goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama, lo yisagoy al goy, lo yilmedu od milchama, v'nomar.
Amen.
Makor HaChaim, source of all life, we ask for a quick end to hostilities around the world and the swift and safe return of our young men and women to their homes in good health. And let us say,
Amen.
prayer for the state of Israel on page 149. Avinu Sheba Shemayim, Sor Yisrael v'goalo, Barechem Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Tzmichat Gulatenu, Hagen Eleha be'evrat chastecha, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך, ושלח אורך וימינך וראשיה שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילי מאלוהינו ישועה, ויעטר את ניצחון תיעטרם. ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן. And now, we actually have something a little special for you. We have a special, a virtual visit from our chief, Temple Beth Emet, our chief astrologist. And we're going to turn to page 151, and we are going to actually have some help. So take it away.
Ashrei Yoshpei Ve'teka Odia Kalelu Kasela Ashrei Am Shekakalo Ashrei Am Shankai Tila Le David Armim Kalo Kaka Belit Be'avrika Shinka Leolam Ba'et Be'cho Yom Ha'markeka Alala Shinka Olam Ba'et Gadol Adonai Kula Me'od Delitula To'e Ke'ker Dorle dor shafach secha urataka yagidu adarke fo deka vidi freini poteka sika ve'ezus urataka yomiru ubedolala saprena zecheraf tu kaya biu esika de kaya neinu alubirachu madonai erechayim lasen tovarnai lako Teraka bavo koma asaf yuka Adonai koma secha v'chasi decha yivakucha kivo mogutaka yomeru ukifurataka yitaberu
L'hodia livnei adam gevurota
Mahutaka mahuko olamin umem shaftaka bekotor fator samecha Adonai lechol hanoflim Bezokek lehor kefim iniko ele kayasa beru ve'atanote lahem eroklam beito hotea etadecha umaspil lechocharazon zadik Adonai bekol tefakav bechasi bekoma asaf karol Adonai lechor korav lechol asher yikru vehem ritzoni af yaseh Ve'esh avatam nishma v'yoshei shomer Adonai kol ve'et koreshayim yashmi Tilad Adonai yidaber pi v'varek kol basar shekotro le'olam va'et Bananu varek ya me'ata ve'a'olam Hallelujah.
Thank you.
Yashkoach, Rabbi.
And now the end of the Torah service, page 153.
And we close off the Torah service and head into the Musaf on page 155, Chatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה.
Amen.
ויעמד יברך ירלותי וימלך מלכותי. בחיים חנוב ימיך ובחייך בית ישראל. בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרהו.
Amen.
יש שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולם לעלמיה. יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתברך ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי קודשך
Barichu.
לילה מכל ברלכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירון ביום ואמרהו.
Amen. We will pray together for the Musaf Amidah on page 156b and 157 for the Kedusha, and then we'll finish silently from pages 157 through 161.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Hayel HaGadol, HaGibur v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gamel Chazadim Tovim, V'ganei HaGoho, V'zacher Chasdei Avohot, Mevi Goel Livnei V'nehem, Leman Shiva B'Yahava, Melech Ozel V'Kidum Moshiach Magim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magin Avraham V'Kid Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechem Itim Atah Rav Hoshia, Morid Atah, Mechakel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayim Eitim Birachamim Rabim, Samich Nachlim Ve'ovei Cholim, U'matir Asurim, U'mekayim Emunata Lishenei Avar, Michamocha B'Givurot, U'midah Melach, Melech Mimid, U'michayel, U'mazmiach Yeshua, V'ne'emanat Alachayot Midil, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechei HaMetim.
Amen.
Naharitzecha v'nahagishecha, Kisot Siyach Sarvei Kodesh, Hamakdishim Shimcha B'Kodesh, Kakatu Hayan Nevi'echa, V'Karazel Zevi'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzivot, Melech Kivavodo, Kivahadam Haliyolam, Misharitav Shalim Zelazeh, Ahimikom Kivavodo, Vilmadam Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Adonai Bimkomo, Bimkomo, Bimkoma, Livin Birachamim, V'yachanam Yahav Yacharim, Hav Yacharim Shema, Erev Avoker, Bechayom David, Hamayim B'Yahava, Shema Omrim, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hu Eloheinu, Hu Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshiachenu, V'Hu Yashmi'enu, B'Rachamav Sheni, V'Yehinei Kol Chai, V'Yolachem Le'Elohim.
Ani Adonai Elohechem.
ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אל היחציהו ותורתו הללויה. ותוכל באדון להגיד קולך, לנצח נצחים ולשדך נקדיש. ושבחך להן מפינו למוסלם בהן, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש, אתה ברוך, אתה אדוני,
Baruch u'Baruch Shem.
האל הקדוש.
158 to 161. And we mark the end of the Musaf and head into our concluding prayers with Kaddish Shalem, page 181.
And I'll do Kaddish Shalem this afternoon, or perhaps this morning, to a little high holiday melody. As Rabbi mentioned the high holidays, I'll give you a preview. And this is especially for Robbie. Thank you, Robbie, because I know you enjoy this melody. Yikara v'yikara shemei Rabba.
Amen.
V'almadi rachudi v'yamlich malchuti b'chayecha.
B'chayecha.
V'yomecha.
V'yomecha.
V'chayedecho
Beit
beit Yisrael
Yisrael.
ba'agala.
Ba'agala.
V'zman karev. V'yemeru. Amen.
Amen.
V'hishmei Rabba mevarach. V'olam omelmeha.
Yitbarach.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitroma v'yinazi v'yitada v'yitale shemire kodesha
Brichu.
v'elamin koverchata berchata v'shirata v'shirata v'nechemata damiron v'olema v'yemeru.
Amen.
Tidkabel salot avod necho Israel Kalavavon divishmaya v'yemeru.
Amen.
Yistam alaba mitshemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yaga
Yahava
Yisrael
Yisrael.
v'yemeru.
Amen.
Ose shalom eromav uyaz shalom aleinu v'yaga Yisrael v'yemeru. Amen.
In Kelohenu 182.
In Kelohenu, in Kadonenu, in Kimalkenu, in Kemoshienu, me, in Kelohenu, me, Kadonenu, me, in Kimalkenu, me, Kemoshienu, in Kelohenu, in Kadonenu, in Kimalkenu, in Kemoshienu, now there, Elohenu, now there. Eladonenu, Nada, Elmagenu, Nada, Mosheinu, Enkelohenu, Kadonino, Inki Magino, Inki Moshieno, Bara, Elohino, Bara, Adonino, Bara, Imagino, Bara, Moshieno, Inki Elohino, Inki Kadonino, Inki Magino, Inki Moshieno, Adahu, Elohino, Adahu, Adonenu, Adahu, Imaginu, Adahu, Mosheinu, Inkelohinu, Inkadonenu, Inkimaginu, Inkimosheinu, Adahu, Eshekhiru, Avahodeinu, Lefa, Anecha, Edgitaret Asamim, Inkelohinu, Kadonino, Inkimagino, Inkimoshienu.
And on page 183, Aleinu L'Shabech.
Aleinu l'shabech
Ladon
l'adon hakol, Latik gdula l'yotzer brishit, Shelo hasanu k'gei haratzah, Velo samara, B'tmechot ha'adama, Shelo samchakidu lahem, V'gahor aleinu, K'chol amolam, V'anachnu karim, U'mishachavim u'morim, Livnei melech, Machi HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu noten shamayim ve'yosei haaretz,
Yikaro b'shamayim ima'al,
Shnein hanuzah, Shnein hanuzah,
Hey miromim,
Hu Eloheinu, Eod. Kakatu b'toratecha, v'nayim lach le'olam va'ed,
Emar v'haya Adonai,
v'melech
haaretz, yom hahu, hahu, unai echad, mo echad, mo echad. You may be seated. In solemn testimony to the unbroken faith which links one generation to the next, those in mourning or observing a yurtzeit will in one moment rise to praise God's name with the words of the mourner's Kaddish, but first yurtzeits observed this week include Rachel Curson, Sadie Liss, Joseph Moskoff, Paul Joseph Moskowitz, Howard Stevens Sekoff, David Scheinman, Daniel Charles Scheiken, Albert Siegel, Barbara Wasserman, David Goodman, Samuel Klein, Terry Gord Semenko, Abraham Solomon, Alla Gerhard, Tommy Moskowitz, Joseph Remez, Gertrude Slanger, Shirley Berkowitz, Betty Nathan, Ruth Young, Sylvia Leiner, Francis Weinstein, Anna Sarah Zweiback, Goldie Zweiback, Nehemiah Zweiback, Rebecca Goodman, Milton Katz, M.D., Estelle Meyerson, Leon Notkin, Morris Reisel, Kate Lowenstein, and Herman Yaffe. Mourner's Kaddish is on page 184. Of course, if you were here and you were near someone saying Kaddish, I'd encourage you to stand next to that person to support them. Mourner's Kaddish, Kaddish Yatom.
Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
V'olmad yivrach yir'utei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayi chon v'yomei chon v'chayi d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru.
Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach li'olam olomei omaya.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudisha.
B'richu.
Le'ela min kol birachata v'shirata, v'shbichata v'nechemata, ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru.
Amen.
Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'mromav, v'yaseh shalom aleinu, v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru.
Amen. Please rise for Kiddush.
V'shamiru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, l'asod et ha-Shabbat, v'dorot amrit olam, be'eni v'v'nei Yisrael oti, v'olam ki sheshet yamim, asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim et haaretz, u'vayom ha-shvi, Shabbat v'yin navash, ha'kim mirach l'nayim ha-Shabbat v'g'nesheh, Sabrai v'lam ram 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 tzai.
L'chaim.
L'bracha t'Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei b'ri ha'gafen.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher hamotzi lech asher kiddushanu k'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim.
Amen.
Little short circuit there. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Oh, they have the salt over there. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
Well, no filler?
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like saying it was, a unique experience. I hope you all enjoyed it, having Robbie join us for the Oshrei. I feel like saying that's one small Oshrei for Robbie Abramovitz, but one giant
leap
Oshrei for
for
Temple
Beth
Beth
Emet, yeah.
Yeah.
And we were testing out to see how well this worked, because we're going to be doing a few things like this during the high holidays. So, okay. Let's, announcements.
Yeah.
Not a lot of them. Get in your Shana Tovos, your New Year's greetings to Women's League. And make sure you get in your re-registration forms for the temple, for the men's club and the women's league. And, make sure you're checking your email for updates and announcements and things like that. We're on page 187.
Let's bring it home.
Let's do it.
Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra v'yein nasa v'chefsocho azai melech shemo nikra azai melech shemo nikra v'yacharim kiklad agol levado imlo nora v'hu haya v'hu over v'hu yeh b'tifara v'hu
B'tifara
Vehu echad, ve'yin sheni l'cham shilo, l'achbira, v'lei reishi, v'lei tachli, v'lo ha'oz, v'ha'misra, v'lo ha'oz, v'ha'misra, v'hu eli, v'chai goli, v'tzor chevli, v'yitzara, v'hu nisi, u'man nasi, Binad Gozi, Biomekra, Binad Gozi,
Biomekra,
Biado, Avki Hidruki, Biatishan, Via ira, via bruchi, via hati, Adonai li, velo ira, Adonai li, velo ira.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.